first light of dawn filtered through the enormous windows of the Blackwell Estate's kitchen, bathing the gleaming marble counters in a soft, golden hue as Chef Elijah Reyes, his salt and pepper hair, testament to decades spent over roaring stoves, straightened his immaculately pressed white coat and applied the finishing touches to his inaugural breakfast service. Every movement of his practiced hands was deliberate as he scattered fresh herbs across each plate, a ritual honed through years in the demanding crucible of a Michelin-starred urban kitchen. Having left that frenetic world behind, Elijah had sought a pace where he could devote himself wholly to his artistry, and the secluded Blackwell Manor, with its promise of tranquility, had felt like the perfect sanctuary, especially on this, his very first morning replacing a predecessor who had departed under whispered mysteries. A soft chime from the kitchen bell announced the arrival of Gerald, the family's venerable butler, whose erect posture and measured expression bespoke decades of unwavering service, an attribute he had noted no fewer than 3 times during Elijah's brief orientation the night before. "Is breakfast ready, Mr. Reyes?" Gerald inquired, his voice crisp as fine linen. Elijah nodded, gesturing toward the row of artfully composed dishes, a smoked salmon Benedict crowned with shimmering black caviar alongside a petite salad crowned by an array of optional dressings. "Mr. Blackwell and Miss Vivian await you in the dining hall," the butler intoned. Then, as if recalling Elijah's newness, softened just enough to add, "You should accompany me, Chef. Mr. Blackwell will wish to extend you a proper welcome." Traversing the mansion's twisting corridors, Elijah carried one tray while Gerald bore the other, their footsteps echoing beneath soaring ceilings, adorned with ornate plasterwork and priceless canvases that seemed to watch them pass. When the grand doors to the dining room swung open, Elijah was struck by the resplendent sight, a vast mahogany table gleaming under the prismatic glow of a crystal chandelier. Seated at its head was Malcolm Blackwell, an impeccably tailored man in his early 50s whose welcoming smile, though genuine in warmth, somehow never quite reached the sharpness in his eyes. At Malcolm's side sat a little girl, her blonde hair pulled into a precise ponytail, her posture withdrawn, and her gaze downcast. "Ah, our new chef," Malcolm said warmly as he rose to greet Elijah. "I'm delighted to meet you at last. Gerald's told me all about your impressive career." As Elijah set his tray upon the table and offered his thanks, Malcolm waved away the formality. "Please, call me Malcolm, and this is my daughter, Vivian." The girl glanced up briefly, her pale blue eyes flickering with an unreadable emotion before she averted her stare once more. Gerald then unveiled the silver domes. Malcolm's plate held the signature salmon Benedict, while Vivian's revealed her personal favorite, an alphabet-shaped vegetable soup served alongside a petite, furry sandwich. Elijah had learned from Gerald that this simple comfort had become Vivian's request of choice in recent months, and the relieved whisper of "thank you" that escaped her lips confirmed the comforting familiarity of the dish. Malcolm offered a nod of approval after his first deliberate taste, praising Elijah's execution before assuring him, "Take your time learning our preferences. Gerald will guide you through our daily customs. Nothing too complicated, I promise." Then, turning to his daughter, he encouraged Vivian to speak up for the chef's benefit. With a small tremor in her voice, she repeated her gratitude, and Elijah responded with genuine warmth, "It's my pleasure, Vivian. I hope this is just the beginning of many meals we'll share." As father and daughter exchanged a glance, his containing a hint of admonition, hers a spark of trust, Elijah realized that, beyond mastering recipes, his true challenge here would be to earn the confidence and perhaps even the friendship of this mysterious little girl whose secrets lay just beneath her silent gaze. "Mr. Reyes, just like the last chef, you'll drive him away too," Malcolm warned, as he dismissed Elijah with a curt nod. Vivian's tiny shoulders sank even lower, her blue eyes fixed on the surface of her abandoned soup. Elijah's heart clenched at the sight of her retreating form, and he wondered what torment lay behind those silent eyes. What could unsettle a child so deeply that even the most seasoned chef would flee? Before he could dwell further, Malcolm turned his attention back to Elijah. "Today's lunch will be delivered to my Cranwick residence. Be sure it's ready by 11:30, and my driver will fetch it." He gave no hint of why the family maintained a second home so near the manor, then rose and strode from the room, leaving Elijah and Gerald alone. Gerald's measured footsteps echoed as he led Elijah back to the kitchen, and Elijah stole another look at Vivian, now listlessly swirling letters of soup in her bowl. Once inside, Gerald went over the precise logistics. Pack the meal into thermal carriers so it arrives piping hot and undisturbed, for Mr. Blackwell detests anything jostled. That done, Gerald slipped away, and Elijah turned to Rosa, the veteran line cook, whose gray bun and easy smile belied her sharp insights. As they arranged ingredients, he asked about the Cranwick house. Rosa confided that it was the family's former home, now Malcolm's private office, and that his ex-wife, Marilyn, once ran her dressmaking shop on the premises. She then lowered her voice to share the family's heartbreak. When the divorce left Vivian in Malcolm's sole care, Marilyn abandoned the child entirely, and Vivian had only just arrived at the manor 9 months ago, withdrawn and unhappy. Elijah's mind raced with Rosa's warning. It wasn't Mr. Blackwell who was hard to please, but Vivian herself. The previous chef had lasted barely 3 months, undone by the girl's constant demands and her habit of toying with her food as if daring him to disappoint her. Yet in Vivian's timid silence, Elijah sensed something more profound, a wounded soul craving understanding. Remembering his own days in foster care, he recalled how a kind word and patient attention had transformed his loneliness into hope. With renewed determination, he promised himself that today's meal would be more than just nourishment. It would be his olive branch to Vivian. As he pulled out fresh basil and heirloom tomatoes to plan lunch for Cranwick, Elijah resolved to cook with empathy, hoping that each savory bite might coax a smile from the little girl with the sad eyes, and perhaps begin to heal whatever sorrow lay hidden behind them. Gerald's voice was unnaturally measured as he halted beside the gleaming kitchen counters. "Chef Reyes," he began, eyes fixed on Elijah, "Miss Vivian has asked specifically that you retrieve her breakfast dishes today, rather than any of the other staff." Elijah let a gentle eyebrow rise. That was certainly out of the ordinary. Ordinarily, a footman or housekeeper would clear the table. Gerald's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. "Indeed," he admitted, "but the young lady can be particular. Like her late mother, she insists on doing things her own way. Mr. Blackwell has endured her whims for months." His posture stiffened, as though preparing to deliver both instruction and warning. If her request goes unheeded, repercussions may follow. Heaven help her if her father knew. A chill crept up Elijah's spine, but he kept his tone polite. "Very well. I'll attend to it immediately." Carrying a silver tray, he retraced his steps to the grand dining hall, where Vivian still sat alone at the end of the mahogany table, her untouched sandwich and congealed vegetable soup the only evidence of breakfast. "Miss Vivian," he said softly, kneeling so they were eye to eye, "I understand you wished for me to clear these dishes." She nodded, her gaze flitting toward the arched windows as if checking for eavesdroppers. When she spoke, her voice was a fragile whisper. "Are you a good man?" Elijah paused. The question was so unexpected, so profound coming from a child, that he had to lean closer to catch every trembling syllable. "I'd like to think so," he answered honestly. "I've never intended harm." Vivian studied his face with an intensity far beyond her 7 years. "Will you be angry with me?" she asked, gesturing to the half-full bowl. Realization washed over him. She'd feared reprimand for leaving her soup unfinished. "Is that why you asked for me?" he gently probed. "Because you worried Gerald would be cross?" She nodded and confessed in a near-muffled voice, "I don't actually like vegetable soup." Kneeling beside her chair, Elijah lowered his voice even further to let her see only kindness. "What sort of soup do you like, then?" "Fruit soup," she answered, a tiny spark of hope brightening her expression. Elijah offered a soft laugh, imagining the cold sweetness of berries in syrup. "You mean something like a chilled fruit compote?" he asked. Vivian's features relaxed into a faint smile. "Yes." Encouraged, Elijah suggested, "Why don't we make a list of every soup you enjoy, and every one you don't? Someday you can visit the kitchen with me, and together we'll create your own menu." Vivian's eyes shone at the promise. She leaned forward for one last taste of the cold broth, but instead of guzzling it down, she used her spoon to nudge letters into a line. H-E-L-P. Elijah's heart skipped as he watched her swallow those letters. Then spoon after spoon, she spelled D-A-D, and finally B-A-D. Her message was unmistakable. "Help Dad bad." His stomach nodded. This was no spoiled child's prank, but a desperate plea. Before he could utter a single reassurance, Gerald reappeared in the doorway. Elijah rose swiftly, smoothing his apron as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. "I'll return these to the kitchen," he murmured to Vivian, offering her a tight nod. Passing Gerald, he received a curt glance, then watched the butler usher Vivian to her shower. "Miranda is waiting." Alone in the empty hall, Elijah's mind raced. The quiet girl had just revealed a terrible secret through alphabet soup, and he knew he must act. As he carried her dishes back toward the warmly lit kitchen, he vowed to uncover the truth behind Vivian's plea, no matter what it took. Elijah barely had time to set the tray down before Gerald reappeared in the service corridor, blocking his path like a sentinel. "What were you and Miss Vivian whispering about?" the butler demanded, his voice low and taut as a drawn wire. Elijah's heart thudded in his chest, but he forced calm into his features. "Nothing improper, Gerald," he replied evenly. "She simply thanked me for the cheesecake and asked about tomorrow's lunch." Gerald's eyes flicked with suspicion, then hardened. That child, quiet as a mouse when her father's around, but the moment he's gone. He let the thought hang between them, heavy with unspoken warning, before sweeping past Elijah toward the kitchen door. Once alone, Elijah exhaled, steadying himself against the wall. He couldn't shake Vivian's plea. "Help, Mom. Dad's keeping her somewhere." He pictured the small girl, trembling with tears, trusting him with her fearful secret. Even if it meant risking Mr. Blackwell's displeasure, he knew he had to act. Turning back to the grill, Elijah ignited the flame and tested the steak's sizzle, forcing his fingers to focus on doneness rather than dread. He seasoned the tenderloin with a precise pinch of sea salt, freshly cracked pepper, and a whisper of smoked paprika, then slid it onto the hot grates. Steam hissed as the meat met the fire, and Elijah allowed himself a moment to plan. First, he would deliver Mr. Blackwell's lunch exactly on schedule, no room for mistakes that might earn Gerald's ire. And then he would quietly explore the manor for clues to Vivian's missing mother. As the steak seared, Elijah prepared the accompanying ratatouille, layering slices of zucchini, eggplant, and heirloom tomato in an oven-proof dish, drizzling them with olive oil and a sprig of rosemary snipped from the herb garden. With each meticulous turn of the vegetables, his resolve strengthened. Vivian wasn't acting out of mere caprice. She was sending an SOS. A soft knock on the kitchen door snapped Elijah back to the present. It was Rosa, her apron dusted with flour. She offered him a knowing look. "The grill is at temperature, and the thermal containers are lined up," she reported quietly. "Do you need anything else before I take over?" Elijah met her gaze and nearly whispered, "Keep an eye on everything. No one can know what's coming." Rosa's eyebrows rose in silent understanding. The unspoken bond between them whispered that they both sensed something was terribly amiss in the Blackwell household. Elijah plated the steak with a flourish, sliding it into the thermal carrier alongside the ratatouille and a crisp roll from the boulangerie. He sealed the container, tested its latch, and wiped his palms on his coat. At exactly 11:29, he lifted the carrier and headed out toward the butler's pantry, his mind a whirlwind of strategy. He would deliver lunch to Cranwick as ordered, but then he planned to linger, perhaps strike up casual conversation with Miranda, the maid, or even slip into Marilyn Blackwell's former dressing room to see if he could uncover any trace of the woman Vivian so desperately missed. Every step echoed in the marble hall as Elijah approached the butler's pantry, bracing himself to confront Gerald. Whatever storm lay behind the sunlit kitchens and manicured lawns, Elijah Reyes was determined to weather it, for Vivian's sake and for the truth that lay hidden in this fortress of privilege and pain. Elijah's heart pounded as he settled into the back seat, the lunch bag resting heavily in his lap. Outside, emerald fields rolled by, the late morning sun gilding hedgerows and casting playful shadows across the winding lane. Despite the idyllic scenery, Elijah felt anything but peaceful. The lingering scent of blood, masked now by passenger car freshener, haunted his nostrils, and Gerald's clipped instructions replayed in his mind. This is how things work here. After 20 minutes of winding roads, the sleek black sedan eased into a tidy cul-de-sac lined with well-worn brick homes, far humbler than the Blackwell mansion, yet still bearing the quiet dignity of long family legacies. The driver, James, glanced in the rearview mirror, his dark glasses betraying no reaction as he halted before a modest two-story house crowned with wisteria. James reached back to unlatch Elijah's door. "Mr. Reyes," he said in a low tone, "please bring the lunch here." Elijah rose and stepped onto a gravel path, small stones crunching beneath his polished loafers. He carried the insulated bag carefully, conscious that every step was a spectacle to the quiet neighborhood. The front door stood ajar, and as he entered a cavernous foyer, he was struck by the contrast between this home's practical simplicity and the ornate opulence of the manor. Inside, floorboards creaked beneath his feet as he followed a narrow hallway to a sunlit breakfast nook. A single French window framed a view of a tidy backyard, but no one was in sight. He set the dishes upon a polished oak sideboard, the gentle clink of porcelain echoing in the empty room. Glancing down at the bag, Elijah steeled himself. If Gerald was to be believed, this was where Vivian's father took his midday repast. Moments later, the door swung open and Malcolm Blackwell appeared, his tailored blazer replaced by a more casual blazer, his features calm yet inscrutable. He offered a brief nod of gratitude as he lifted the lid from his lunch, perfectly pink steak juxtaposed with vibrant ratatouille. "Chef Reyes," he said smoothly, "your timing is impeccable." Before Elijah could reply, Malcolm's gaze shifted to the laundry hamper in the corner, one identical to the bag he had glimpsed earlier. Its lid lay open, revealing neatly folded linens, and buried beneath them, a square of blue silk speckled with dark stains. Malcolm's expression didn't flicker, but Elijah sensed his unease. "I trust you noticed the request for fruit soup this morning," Malcolm continued, voice steady. "We'll discuss the menu for tomorrow later, but for now, you may join me for a moment." Elijah's pulse quickened as Malcolm gestured toward a doorway leading to a compact study off the kitchen. He followed, laden with apprehension, clutching the lunch bag as though it were a shield. Inside, walls lined with family portraits exuded a sterility that felt colder than any mansion corridor. Malcolm closed the study door behind them. "I hear you've taken an interest in my daughter's preferences," he began, his tone neutral, "and perhaps in the whereabouts of my ex-wife." Elijah swallowed. He had not intended to reveal his suspicions, yet here he stood, lunch in hand, cornered by the family patriarch. Across the desk, Malcolm's steepled fingers rested upon a file folder. Someone had been keeping a dossier. I know Vivian confided in you, Malcolm continued, voice low. I do not ordinarily tolerate fraternization between staff and family, yet he paused as if weighing his words. I also know my daughter's happiness matters more than protocol. If you truly care about her well-being, you will keep what you've seen here between us and assist me in ensuring she remains safe. Elijah's chest tightened. In that moment, he realized the stakes were far higher than serving a perfectly cooked meal. He had a choice: remain complicit in whatever secret haunted the Blackwell family, or risk everything by exposing the truth behind Vivian's desperate plea. He steadied his voice. Mr. Blackwell, sir, I want only what's best for Miss Vivian. Malcolm's lips curved into a fleeting, inscrutable smile. Then you'll do as I ask. As Elijah placed a respectful nod, he understood that from this point on, his role as chef would intertwine with a silent promise to protect the child who had spelled out her fear in soup, even if it meant defying the most powerful man he had ever worked for. All the way to Cranwick, Elijah sat rigidly in the back seat, casting furtive glances at the driver through the rearview mirror as crimson fields and hedgerows blurred past. When they finally arrived at the Victorian manor set grandly behind a walled garden, the car door swung open before he could even gather his thoughts. A tall, stern-faced man in a charcoal suit, more bodyguard than butler, stood waiting on the front steps. You're the new chef? The guard asked in a clipped tone, never offering a hand. Elijah Reyes, he replied, keeping his voice steady. I was asked to deliver lunch personally today, something about ensuring the presentation arrives intact. The man's skepticism was palpable, but he stepped aside and led Elijah through an echoing entrance hall whose faded grandeur seemed stripped of warmth. Up marble stairs and through an arched doorway, they passed a neglected sitting room where dusty dress forms and half-finished gowns bore silent witness to Marilyn Blackwell's former workshop. One mannequin wore a scrap of blue silk, the same fabric Elijah had spotted stained in the laundry bag at the mansion. If Marilyn had truly abandoned her daughter, why did her workspace remain preserved here? At the far end of the corridor, they entered a compact dining room where Malcolm Blackwell waited behind a polished oak table, papers splayed at his elbow. His surprise at seeing Elijah was genuine. Chef Reyes, he said, setting aside his documents, I didn't expect you to deliver my lunch yourself. I apologize for the deviation, sir, Elijah answered smoothly. I've prepared a special meal for your first service day and wanted to ensure it arrived just so. Malcolm frowned at his watch. This has delayed my meal. I hope it proves worth your patience. With practiced efficiency, Elijah unpacked the thermal carriers, arranging steak, perfectly medium rare, alongside ratatouille, a crusty roll, and a final theatrical flourish, a tableside flambe that sent a curl of cinnamon-scented flame dancing above the dish. Even Malcolm's initial annoyance dissolved into appreciation as he tasted the first bite. This may well be the finest lunch I've had in years, he admitted, the corners of his mouth lifting in genuine delight. Thank you, chef. Of course, sir, Elijah replied, gathering the empty containers. The guard reappeared at the doorway. James is dining in the service room, he informed Elijah. You'll need to wait a few minutes before returning. Spotting the closed door to a once formal kitchen, Elijah seized his chance. May I look inside while I wait? Professional curiosity? The guard hesitated, then shrugged. Very well. It's been unused for years. They walked together down a narrow hall to a cavernous kitchen layered in dust, its counters bare and spirits of clanging pans long silenced. Why wouldn't Mr. Blackwell prepare lunches here? Elijah asked casually. I don't question his choices, the guard responded abruptly. It's not my place. As they spoke, the atmosphere pressed in on Elijah. The security, the preserved sewing studio, the stale scent of old blood still haunting his memory. It all hinted at something far darker than a simple secondary office. "I need to use the restroom," Elijah said suddenly, excusing himself with a half-smile. The guard pointed down the corridor without a word, and Elijah slipped away. Once alone, he lingered in the dusty hallway, straining to catch voices from the service room, where James and the guard were lunching. Every footstep echoed like a warning. He was trespassing on secrets meant to stay buried. Yet Elena's plea, "Help Mom, Dad bad," drove him forward. He crept toward the service area, determined to uncover whatever truth lay hidden behind Cranwick's silent walls. Elijah's heart pounded as he crouched beside Marilyn, the half-finished blue gown brushing his cheek. He pressed his finger to his lips, silencing her frantic breaths, and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. "Emergency," he whispered into the phone, keeping the volume low. "I'm at 47 Cranwick Road. I need the police. A woman is being held against her will in the basement. Please send officers immediately." The operator's voice crackled reassurance, but Elijah barely heard it over the thunder in his ears. He ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket. Above them, heavy footsteps approached the lock. Gerald's voice drifted down. "Marilyn, are you here?" Marilyn's hand clamped over her mouth to stifle a sob. Elijah steadied himself. "Stay calm," he murmured. "Let him open the door." The key turned in the lock. Gerald's breath hissed through the gap as he pulled the door inward. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then Gerald stepped inside, lantern in hand, scanning the basement's dim corners. Elijah made eye contact with Marilyn. She nodded, her lips barely moving. 3, 2, 1. Suddenly, Elijah lunged. He grabbed Gerald's lantern arm and yanked it skyward. The flare of light revealed Marilyn's hidden form against the fabric of the dress form. "Marilyn!" Gerald roared, stumbling back as the lantern swung wildly. "Leave her alone!" Elijah shouted, backing toward the stairs. "I'm not afraid to call the police!" Gerald lunged, but Elijah sidestepped and shoved him toward the steep stairwell. Gerald caught himself on the banister, the lantern clattering to the floor and sending sparks dancing across the dusty tiles. Elijah scooped Marilyn's hand. "This way," he hissed, already scrambling upward, pulling her behind him as they fled into the narrow hallway above. They burst through the last door into the stifling heat of the old kitchen, where the guard's lunch sat half-eaten on a sideboard. "Elijah?" Marilyn whispered, her voice ragged. "Come on!" he urged, gripping her elbow and guiding her toward a back staircase he had glimpsed earlier. The older chef's instincts and brief glimpses of the floor plan drove him now. As they crept up the narrow steps, distant sirens wailed, confirmation that help was on its way. A flush of hope surged through Elijah. If only they could reach the front door unseen. At the top, they emerged into the hallway once more. Through a side door, the guard's service corridor beckoned, and beyond that, flashes of blue and red strobed against the wallpaper. "Elijah?" Marilyn asked again, tears in her eyes. "We've almost made it," he promised. "Stay close." Unlocking the service door with an extra turn of his chef's fork, Elijah pushed it open. The guard stood there, startled, his half-eaten sandwich dropping from his hand. "What?" he began, but an urgent shout from outside cut him off. "Police! Open up!" Elijah grabbed Marilyn's arm and sprinted down the steps. Behind them, the guard hesitated, caught between loyalty to Malcolm and the impossible reality of law officers swarming the grounds. Together, they burst through the kitchen's back exit and into the manicured courtyard, the night air cool against their flushed faces. Blue lights danced across the lawn as officers fanned out, their voices commanding, "Stop right there!" Elijah guided Marilyn into the open arms of two uniformed officers who swiftly ushered her to safety. He raised a hand to show he carried no weapon. An inspector approached, badge gleaming. Chef Reyes? She asked, already recognizing his gray-streaked hair from his description. Are you the one who called? He nodded, voice hoarse. Yes, Marilyn Blackwell. She's been held prisoner by Malcolm. As officers moved to block the road and swarm the manor, Elijah sank to the ground, relief and adrenaline colliding in his chest. Above him, the grand windows of Cranwick House glowed faintly, their secrets finally set to unravel under the flashing lights and determined voices of the law. The gravel crunched beneath the car's tires until the driver stopped in front of a sprawling Victorian home set behind a thicket of hedges. As Elijah climbed out, he was met by a stone-faced guard in a dark suit, more bodyguard than servant. "You're the chef?" the man demanded, his tone brisk. Elijah kept his composure. "Yes, I was asked to deliver Mr. Blackwell's lunch myself. Presentation matters, apparently." The guard's gaze sharpened, but after a moment, he led Elijah inside. They passed through an ornate foyer and into a series of elegant rooms stripped of character. In one dusty sewing studio, half-finished gowns lingered on dress forms, blue silk scraps that matched the stained fabric from the mansion's laundry bag. If Marilyn Blackwell had truly vanished, why had her workspace been preserved? At length, they reached a cozy dining room where Malcolm sat behind a small oak table, papers spread before him. He looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "Chef Reyes? I wasn't expecting you." Apologizing, Elijah explained his detour and began unpacking the thermal containers. He plated each element, seared steak, vegetable compote, crusty roll, before capping the performance with a dramatic tableside flambe. Even Malcolm's stern demeanor cracked into genuine appreciation. "Best lunch I've had in years," he admitted, savoring another bite. Soon after, a guard told Elijah to wait since the driver was dining in the service room. Seizing the chance, Elijah asked to see the unused kitchen. The guard relented, and they descended a narrow corridor into a vast, dust-shrouded space. "Why cook here if you don't use it?" Elijah ventured. The guard shrugged and returned to his duties, leaving Elijah alone amid silent ovens and cobwebbed counters. Something about the emptiness, the hush, set Elijah's pulse racing. He needed answers, and he suspected the basement might hold them. Excusing himself, he slipped down the hall until he found a solid wooden door with a sturdy lock. Years of emergencies had taught him the art of the plastic card shim, and with a soft click, the door swung open. He wedged his lucky chef's fork into the latch for a quick barricade, then killed the lights and crept into darkness. A muffled thump echoed below. "Hello?" Elijah whispered, voice steady. "I'm Elijah Reyes, the new chef." He descended the creaking steps and found himself in a sprawling basement workshop. Sewing machines, fabric rolls, and a half-finished blue dress on a mannequin. Scattered scraps and a pair of scissors hinted someone had been here recently. From behind a dress form, a trembling figure emerged, a gaunt woman with long blonde hair, her wrist in a crude bandage, bruises marking her arms. "Who are you?" she croaked. "Elijah Reyes," he answered gently. "I work for your husband." At the mention of Vivi, her eyes widened. "Vivienne knows I'm alive?" she gasped. "Is she safe?" "She's at the mansion," Elijah assured her. "But you're in danger. I need to get you out." Tears slipped down her cheeks as she explained her months of captivity, how Malcolm had snatched her from school pickup, confined her here under the guise of rehabilitation, and hidden her cries for help. Any attempt to flee was met with false psychiatric reports, ready-made to brand her as unstable. "We need proof," Elijah said. "Anything, a letter, a journal." Marilyn shook her head. He'd seen her desperation for signs from her daughter. Then she remembered hidden codes sewn into the dresses, dates, names, locations stitched silently into their linings. "They're upstairs," she whispered. A thunderous crash above announced someone breaking into the basement. "They'll be down soon," Marilyn warned. Elijah positioned himself between her and the staircase. Malcolm Blackwell appeared, eyes blazing with fury, flanked by the guard and the driver. "What is this?" he snarled. Elijah squared his shoulders. "You've been holding Marilyn prisoner, lying to the courts and silencing your wife." Malcolm's face twisted into a practiced smirk. "That's absurd. Marilyn has severe mental issues. She broke in, raving about our daughter. I've tried to protect you both." Marilyn stepped forward, voice ringing true. "You kidnapped me. I have custody papers. You've kept me locked here so you could manipulate Vivian." Malcolm sighed theatrically. "This delusion is worsening." He turned to the men behind him. "Remove them." Elijah lifted his phone. "Officer, we're at 47 Cranwick Road. Please hurry." Malcolm's eyes flicked to the screen, then to Elijah's unwavering gaze. "You've made a grave mistake, Chef, but you forgot one thing," Elijah replied quietly. "Your daughter told me everything, spelling out 'help Dad bad' in her alphabet soup." For a heartbeat, Malcolm's mask slipped, revealing an abyss of rage, and Elijah knew that, no matter what came next, Vivian's courageous plea had already set something extraordinary in motion. The bullet's roar still echoed in Elijah's ears as the paramedics enveloped him in their practiced urgency. Marilyn hovered by his side, her face etched with relief and fear in equal measure. An officer gently guided her out of the basement, assuring her Vivian was safe at the mansion under constant guard. Elijah's vision swam as he was strapped to the stretcher. Every bump of the board pressed his wound, and the metallic warmth of his blood spread across his side like a cruel reminder of his sacrifice. Yet, through the haze of pain, a fierce pride blossomed within him. He had stood between a desperate mother and a violent tyrant, all because a little girl had dared to spell out her need in soup. "Hang on, Chef Reyes," the paramedic murmured, voice firm but kind. "We've got you." As they carried him up the creaking basement stairs, the once ominous workroom shrank behind him, its secrets now buried beneath flashing lights and the wail of sirens. In the foyer, more officers milled about, cuffing the guard and driver, their faces drawn in disbelief at the night's revelations. Malcolm Blackwell, crumpled against the wall and groaning in pain, met Elijah's gaze with a storm of hatred that soon gave way to something like shame. "You saved them," Marilyn whispered as she climbed the steps alongside him, her hand resting on his shoulder despite the effort it cost. Tears glistened in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of gratitude and hope. "You saved our family." Elijah managed a tired smile. "Vivi's brave," he rasped. "She showed me the way." At the top of the stairs, a uniformed detective nodded at him. "Your daughter's safe," she confirmed. "And you did the right thing." They eased him into the waiting ambulance, the doors sliding closed on the fractured world of lies and hidden rooms he was leaving behind. As the paramedics began their work, stanching the bleeding, preparing him for transport, Elijah's thoughts drifted to Vivian, her pale blue eyes alight with courage, her small hands moving letters across a spoon. He pictured her safe in the grand kitchen of the mansion, guarded by officers rather than butlers, finally able to be just a child again. Above him, the sky lightened toward dawn, the long night waning at last. And somewhere in the distance, he imagined hearing a faint splash, Vivian at the pool, free from fear, perhaps enjoying the first real breakfast she'd ever eaten. Elijah closed his eyes, a weary but triumphant smile tugging at his lips. He'd come to Cranwick as a chef craving tranquility, but he would leave as something more, a guardian who listened when a child whispered for help in soup, and who answered the call, no matter the cost. A squad of officers clustered in the driveway as Elijah lay on the stretcher, the afternoon sun slicing through the trees. Through the haze of pain medication, he saw Malcolm Blackwell, cuffed, injured, and escorted up the steps by uniformed detectives. The man's eyes burned with disbelief, as if he could not fathom how his carefully ordered life had unraveled in a single day. A detective crouched beside Elijah and gently asked, "Chef Reyes, Can you tell me what happened?" Through gritted teeth, Elijah recounted Vivian's desperate alphabet soup plea, the blood-stained dress in Gerald's laundry bag, and the discovery of Marilyn chained in the basement. Marilyn, still pale but upright and resolute at his side, added urgently, "Check the locked room next to Malcolm's office. My dresses have messages sewn into their linings, dates, names, locations. I don't know their significance, but they're proof." The detective scribbled notes, promising to investigate as soon as Elijah received medical care. "Elijah," Marilyn squeezed his hand, tears glimmering in her eyes, "tell Vivian the soup worked. She saved us." Elijah managed a weak nod. "I will. I promise." Moments later, paramedics began wheeling him toward the ambulance. The detective leaned in. "Your daughter is safe, and Gerald is in custody," she assured him. Marilyn refused hospital transport. She insisted on seeing Vivian first. Marilyn approached, her back straighter than when he had found her. "I can't thank you enough," she whispered. "You risked everything because you listened to a child." Elijah mustered a tired smile. A child's truth is often the only truth there is. As they loaded him into the ambulance, the world outside spun with police activity, officers searching the main mansion, taking statements, and finally reuniting Vivian with her mother. Sirens faded into the distance, replaced by the steady beep of the ambulance monitors. Elijah closed his eyes, reflecting on how a simple bowl of soup, letters floating in broth, had sparked a chain of events that saved a family. A paramedic adjusted his IV and said softly, "Not everyone would have done what you did." Elijah thought of his days in foster care, of quiet children longing to be heard, and of every young cook he had mentored. He believed then and now that doing what's right is seldom glamorous, but always necessary. "Courage," he murmured, "is often just paying attention to what's right in front of you." As the ambulance carried him toward surgery and a long recovery, Elijah felt a rare sense of peace. His first day as the Blackwell family's chef had transformed into a crucible of truth, sacrifice, and unexpected heroism. He didn't know what the future held, whether he'd return to kitchens or chart a new path, but he knew this. Sometimes the smallest act of listening, like noticing a child's message in soup, can change the world.